Greece is once again in the grip of a general strike as people protest against the government's new raft of harsh austerity measures aimed to keep the debt-ridden country solvent. Athens is currently planning measures to save an extra €23 billion by 2015. Ordinary Greeks are outraged. They're destroying our lives. They're really destroying our lives with these measures. People need to come out onto the streets in their millions. How much more can the people take? And there are more, tougher measures coming. With these measures, nothing changes. The only thing that changes is that people are getting poorer, and the measures are all against them. Whatever has been accomplished in the past for workers' rights is now being taken away, bit by bit. The Greek debt is now a staggering €340 billion, leading to speculation that the country will need some fresh ideas if it's to keep up with repayments when the EU IMF loan runs out in 2013.
As Greece struggles to address its huge economic deficit, thousands of people marched on the parliament in Athens in what became a nationwide strike against austerity measures. Cuts in pay and pensions, as well as tax hikes and plans for privatization, have been introduced by the ruling socialist government of Prime Minister Yorgos Papandreou under an agreement with the European Union, the International Monetary Fund, and the European Central Bank, which have given Greece a bailout loan of €110 billion.
The one hit hardest by the crisis are workers, pensioners, and unemployed. The rich, who are responsible for the crisis, are still having a party at the expense of others.
The measures promoted by the government will make many poor. Civil resistance is the only way out of the current deadlock.
With rumors that Greece may default, the Greek left urged the people to fight against the policies which they say will leave them impoverished.
People are angry at the state's policies, and they must show it on the streets. There's no other way.
While the demonstration was mostly peaceful, clashes erupted in the area close to the Athens University between riot police and demonstrators. The police made heavy use of tear gas and stun grenades. The strike coincides with the visit of Greece's creditors, who are checking whether the country has met the necessary conditions to get its next installment of aid. The demonstration sends a strong signal to the European Union, International Monetary Fund, and European Central Bank officials that are visiting Athens in order to monitor Greece's progress. But while public opinion matters, what probably matters to them most is the inability of the Greek government, at least so far, to achieve the targets that have been agreed under the bailout loan terms. Michael Kosmidis, Athens, Press TV.
Some sad stories there, and joining me now to assess what is happening to the American dream for those stories you just heard, those people, and for so many others, is Michael T. Snyder, founder of the economic collapse blog. Michael, thanks so much for being with us. I want to start with the jobs numbers that came out today, because a lot of the mainstream analysis is touting these numbers as encouraging, as good news, because the economy added more jobs than expected. At the same time, though, we saw the unemployment rate rise a little bit because more people entered the labor market, and plenty of stories and statistics that show the struggle of Americans still. So I want to know your take. Are these jobs numbers encouraging?
Yeah, there's a couple different aspects we should talk about here. First, the job number is slightly encouraging. However, it should be, because we need to remember the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve have essentially gone all in an all-out attempt to stimulate the U.S. economy in the short term. The U.S. government has been doing all these stimulus packages, $1.5 trillion in debt this year alone. The Federal Reserve has dropped interest rates to rock bottom, and they've been doing all this quantitative easing. So the truth is that the unemployment should be much lower than it is right now. It's actually discouraging to see that all of these efforts by the U.S. government, the Federal Reserve, have not produced more results. Now, in the long run, all this borrowing is going to be disastrous for us. Now, another element to look at here is look at the number of Americans that are employed. For example, last year, only 45.4% of all Americans had a job. That was the lowest number since 1983. Then if you look at the number of American men, only 66.8% of American men had a job last year. That was the lowest number ever recorded.
And now, Michael, those are some of the statistics you pointed out in a recent column on what's happened to the American dream. And another that you point out is that 41% of all jobs in the U.S. are low income. So this job growth that we're seeing, some of the biggest gains last month were in retail, manufacturing, healthcare, restaurants. We know McDonald's announced they'll be hiring 62,000 workers. Are these more of these low-income jobs, and are those the jobs that the American dream was built on?
That's exactly right. In fact, over the past decade, the number of middle-income jobs has declined by 10% in America. This is a long-term trend and a long-term problem. So you're exactly right. The job growth is in places like McDonald's, welcoming people to Walmart, and that's a huge problem. I remember back when I was a teenager, I walked into a McDonald's, asked for a job application. I was hired that very day because they were desperate to find people to work. But today we heard about that National Hiring Day that McDonald's just held. Over 1 million people across the United States showed up, and only 62,000 were hired, so that's about 6.2%. Now, if you compare that to Harvard, Harvard accepts 7% of the people that apply for Harvard. So today in the United States, it is actually easier to get into Harvard than it is to get a job at McDonald's.
Doesn't seem to...
Hello everyone, welcome to Global Government News. Today is Wednesday, May 11th, 2011, and I'm Darko. This is my website, www.ggnonline.com. That's ggnonline.com. I have a poll up here, and it's going to be up for about one more day. It's what is your take on Osama bin Laden? He's a real grassroots terrorist who intends to do innocent people harm. Right now that's 7%. Or 3 voters. The big ones are he's a CIA operative who was used as a frontman for government-sponsored terrorism at 64% or 27 votes. Then bin Laden has been dead for years. That's got 20 votes, so that's the majority of the voters saying that, with 11% or 5 voters saying bin Laden was just killed recently. I had a commenter say something about fixing the polls because the percentages don't add up. Well, if you don't like the percentages, I would ask you nicely to just look at the numbers. I think the numbers speak for themselves. So, because I'd like to get as many possible options in there as possible. So, if you like to follow me on eBlogger, you can. You go down here to the right, or if you have a Facebook account, you can follow me on Facebook with this network blogs. All right, I usually start with the economy, and that's what I'll start with. So, dollar mixed on deeper trade deficit, Greece woes. The dollar is mixed against major currencies Wednesday after a report showed a growing U.S. trade deficit. And I have plenty of interesting news today, so just stick with me if you're new. Forbes predicts U.S. gold standard within 5 years. Return to the gold standard by the United States within the next 5 years now seems likely because that move would help the nation solve a variety of economic, fiscal, and monetary ills, Steve Forbes predicted during an exclusive interview this week with Human Events. Then the yuan, a stronger yuan, mainly due to U.S. dollar depreciation. Moving on to commodities, still going down, as you can see. And we have Brent crude now at $112 per barrel. It was down $5. And then moving on to natural gas futures, we're pretty much the same. Heating oil was up $2.28. Agriculture with cocoa is up $13 and $3. Coffee was down $9.45. Corn down $1.20. Cotton down $1. Wheat looks like it was up slightly. And then moving down here to precious metals, of course, we have copper, and copper was down 85 cents at $390.50. Then gold, $1,502.40 per ounce. It was up at only $1. And silver down below 40 at $35.48. Still not bad if you were purchasing silver when it was $7 an ounce, 3 years ago. So commodities lead stocks down. We have stocks nearly erased a 3-day rally on Wednesday as energy and other commodity shares sank, feeding worries about the market's ability to stay on a upward path. Then moving on to gold and silver, prices recover after Carnage. So. And most of the links will be posted here, so check them out in the YouTube's videos description down there. I usually have all the headlines with the links, so my YouTube channel is ddarko2012. Gold slides as firmer dollar undermines commodities, and then gasoline slump drags oil prices to second big drop. Oil prices tumbled over 4% on Wednesday after an unexpected rise in gasoline stocks amid slowing demand sent prices into a tailspin, triggering a 5-minute halt in trade and fueling the second big commodities sell-off in a week. And then we have oil drops below $100 as U.S. supplies surge. So oil fell below $100 a barrel in New York, and gasoline tumbled the most in more than 2 years after an Energy Department report showed that U.S. supplies surged and fuel demand slipped. So, all right, families brace for gas price hike in UK. So it looks like they're bracing for higher energy bills as major British gas company declares a 25% hike in gas and power prices for the next year's delivery. So bad news for Brits. And unfortunately, I have some more news for people living in the UK, so stick with me. India food prices rise, more tightening expected. Food prices in India rose, and the week ended in April 23rd, signaling that inflation remains stubbornly high despite previous steps to rein in prices, which it never works and it never will, right? You have the Greek crisis right now, and everybody's like, oh, we want to do this, we want to do that. But the fact of the matter is yeah, it's all being done to the people. Basically, people that aren't in office or working as CEOs for corporations or investments, right? So the best thing that you can do is basically just stop playing the whole government game and end it. And then you don't have to go begging for scraps, right? And talk about fiscal responsibility, because it just doesn't exist. So South Australians will be hit with a big water price rise over the next 2 years, costing the average home $400 more. So South Australians have paid more for water. CNBC, stagflation is back. It officially returned today with a nasty GDP report that showed only 1.8% real growth, but 3.8% for the consumer spending deflator. Then we have, it's a mini version of the 1970s, low growth and higher inflation. Of course, high unemployment. China inflation spreading beyond food adds pressure. China's inflation is spreading beyond food, signaling Premier Hiabo's strategy of quarter-point interest rate increases every 2 months has yet to contain consumer prices. So once again, just what I just said, right? China struggling to cool inflation. Tightening measures by Beijing have helped to ease China's inflation rate, but not to contain it. And officials warn that inflation now is spreading beyond food prices. So just pretty much covering that over again with a different source. CPI, Consumer Price Index, rises 5.3% in April, and inflation lingers, and that's in China, of course. Beijing's trade surplus balloons, and then we have U.S. trade gap widens more than expected in March. UK inflation. Bank of England raises medium-term inflation forecast. The Bank of England raised its medium-term inflation forecast to just under 2%, and its May inflation report potentially paving the way for a November rate rise. UK growth to slow and prices to rise. Bank of England warns economists are penciling in the first interest rate rise for November after the Bank of England warned that the country faces a toxic combination of slower than expected growth and higher inflation. Then we have a rate rise forecast for this year. Bank of England's forecast suggests that some city experts may have been too hasty in ruling out a hike in the interest rates this year. Commonwealth Bank expects up to 2 interest rate rises this year and will pass them on. CBA expects rate rises in the next 6 months. Banks facing tougher regulation globally. Budget bark as worse than bite, says Norris. And moving on here, Britain see average savings drop by £100 to £1,700, and Britain's savings levels now stand on an average of £1,783, down £100 on the same quarter last year. Then we have UK university hikes fees and cuts courses. Then Britain to close several embassies abroad. Then we have British military warns it is stretched to its capacity. And then we have U.S. underwater homeowners increased to 28%, Zillow says. Then moving on here, reports of mortgage fraud reach record level. And then we have banks float $5 billion deal to end foreclosure probe. And it says here, don't buy a house in 2011 before you read these 20 wacky statistics about the U.S. real estate crisis. And moving down here, I'll just read a couple of them. You can finish it up yourself with the links posted. It says, number one, according to Zillow, 28% of all single-family homes with a mortgage in the U.S. are now underwater. So that they've also announced that the average price of a home in the U.S. is about 8% lower than it was a year ago, and then it continues to fall. Number three, U.S. home prices have now fallen a whopping 33% from where they were during the peak of the housing bubble. Number 4, during the first quarter of 2011, home values declined at a faster rate since late 2008. So you can join me in part 2 of this news bulletin. This is GGN, and I'm Darko. Thank you.